Okay, we're going to work on the fruit still life painting, but the first thing we have to do is work on the sketch. So the easiest way to approach the sketch in order to get the placement of all the different fruit on the different levels, including the box and the fruit on top. First thing I'm going to do, we're going to break up the painting surface. In this case, it's a heavier weight of paper, and we are going to create what's called the rule of thirds. And so we're going to break this up into three parts and then three parts horizontally. So first thing I'm going to do, you can measure this or you can just kind of eyeball it. So if you make some lines on the side just to start, just try and get a rough placement of everything. So this one is just a little high up, so I'm going to put it a little bit lower. And we'll make our next mark in this area. And this one's still maybe a little tall. So we're going to put it right there. And just so I don't get confused, I'm going to erase these other marks. So now I have three equal parts created by these two line markings. So just so I get these pretty straight, I'm going to use my ruler. So now I have three rows, and now I need to create three columns. And so this rule of thirds is a composition technique, mostly used in photography, but can also work in art. We're simply using it to help place everything. So I want to do the same thing. So I'm going to break this up into three separate sections. Okay, so these are looking pretty even. There we go. Now I'm going to connect these to the top. All right, so what I've done, I've broken it up into 9 total rectangles. So when looking at the photograph, and so this is slide number 17, I believe, in the slideshow. When looking at the photograph on the slideshow, we can see how that is broken up as well. So we have a vertical line here, we have a vertical line here, here, and here. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw the wooden box on the back table that all the fruit are resting on. So this back line of the wooden box, this is going to be the same line in placement as this line on our rule of thirds. Now, we do have a little bit of space on the side between the edge of the box and where we have that negative space. And so this spacing is maybe about an inch in, roughly. So I'm just going to sketch a vertical line that goes all the way to the top of this. And then I'm going to sketch this vertical line down past that line. So past this rule of thirds line. And I'm going to go maybe just a little bit further than an inch, just a touch further. So maybe about right here. So there's the edge of the paper. Now I'm going to sketch, just kind of darken this line that goes across. And then since this is the bottom of the box, I'm going to sketch this over this way. So just try and get this line parallel to the bottom of the paper and then this rule of thirds line. Now, we can see where there's an angle in this area from the box, so we can see that right here. So just imagine that, this line continues straight up and then it goes straight over. And so what it does, it leaves this little negative triangular space. So in order to capture this, I'm going to try and recreate this angle. So it's not quite a 45-degree angle. It's maybe a little bit more than that. And then right where this line ends, I'm just going to sketch straight over. So again, it has to be parallel with this, should be parallel with this rule of thirds line. And then we do have a little sliver of a corner here. So really the box runs off the edge of the paper or off the edge of the image plane. And we have another angle that is the same as this one for the most part. It's just opposite. So we're going to sketch the angle like this, and it just kind of disappears right there. So we have the basics down for that wooden box. Just going to fix one line. And then just so I don't get confused, I'm going to go ahead and erase this area so I can see the box as it goes back in space. Then do the same over here. So now I can see the box. So that looks more three-dimensional. Now, the first thing I am going to sketch, we're going to look at the orange that will be in this area. So when looking at the orange, if you look at the very edge of this wooden box that we have already drawn, what it does, it basically is splitting the orange in half for the most part. And then, if you can see the very bottom of the box here, it kind of does like this. So the orange comes down further than the bottom of the greenish wooden box that we have. Now, in this particular printout, what it's leaving out, so the printout cropped off a little bit, we do have a little bit of extra space, which if looking at the image on the slideshow, you'll see where there's a little bit of extra space from the orange. So there's, roughly about this much extra space. So I have this line. We know that's going to be the center marking of the orange. And then it's really kind of a matter of where are we putting the orange? How much space are we going to have? Now, if we look at the image, and you can see this on the screen, we have this rule of thirds marking line coming through about here. So that would be this. So that tells us that the orange is going to come up above this. Now, what the orange does, it fits into this perfect square. And so I know how far out the orange will be. So it'll come this far out. And we know this is roughly the center. So if I know from here to here is half, I can just kind of take a measurement. So the end of my pencil and the edge of the line. And then I'm going to mark it with my finger. And so kind of other side of the square I'm going to draw is going to end about here. So I'm just going to sketch down. And since the orange, it's not a perfect circle, but for the most part, it is very, very circular. You know, a perfect circle would fit inside a perfect square. And so if I know this length, and since we're working with a square, that'll automatically tell me how tall and far down I need to draw. So just working with that square shape. And all of this you'll want to sketch fairly light simply because, this is just kind of a bounding box. It just kind of tells us where to put the orange. So I have that square in place. So now I can draw in that rounded form for the orange. All right. So we have our orange kind of round circular shape in place. And we also have a table line. Now, this line of the table, this is going to be slightly above where that rule of thirds line would be. So it'll cut into the orange just a little bit. So actually, I need to make this orange just a little bit taller in order to fit that. Okay. So really my table marking line should be about here. And what that tells me, it tells me that I made my orange just a little small. I'm going to have to adjust some things. So I'm going to go ahead and put that table line. So this is my table line. Here's my rule of thirds line. I should have probably made the orange more up here in terms of the height. So I'm still working with a square. I'm just moving my orange up just a little bit. All right, so now I can resketch my circle inside the square. And so what we're doing while we are drawing all the different pieces of fruit for this painting, we're going to work with a lot of just basic geometry in terms of how squares and rectangles or rectilinear shapes can really help us draw more organic shapes like the lime or the lemon or the banana. There we are. So now I'm just going to erase everything on the inside. And then I'm going to take away that little line that was the rule of third, just right here. And then I'm going to remove this square that I had sketched. So now I have just that basic placement of the orange. So the next item I'm going to draw, I'm going to go ahead and move to the top. And so I'm going to draw the banana. Now, as you can see in slide 17, the banana takes up that entire width of that middle portion of the image. And so in this case, it's going to fill this middle 1/3 section. Now, what the banana also does is that the very tip of the banana and this back line of the box, what the back line of the box does, it really splits the banana in half. And so that tells me, and it helps me see where I'm going to place this. And so in order to draw the banana, we just have a slight curve line that moves upward. And then this curve is going to stop just short of this line. So the very end stem of the banana, which is going to be right here. So I'm going to draw kind of that oval end part where it was cut off the tree. So that's going to touch this line. The curve that I'm drawing now is going to fall just short of that. And then what this does, it kind of curves and angles back in, and then it forms this stem. So this banana is very organic in its shape, so it's kind of irregular. And then this line, the underneath portion of the banana is going to curve up. And so that's just the basic outline of the banana. What we can also put in, and before I do this, I'm going to erase this back line of the box because we can't see through the banana. And the next line I'm going to draw is just simply the part where the banana would peel. So it starts right pretty much where that back line of the box would be. So right here. And this curve isn't nearly as parallel as like these two lines were with one another. So what this one does, it starts to really kind of curve and fold down, and then it's going to meet like this line approximately. And then we have kind of another curved line that does like this. So that's just the basic form of the banana. I'm going to try and curve that just a little bit more. So that's the placement of the banana, and that's going to help us a lot for kind of seeing where everything else goes. Now, when drawing, it's always a lot easier if you draw what you can see all of first. So we can see all of the orange, we can see all of the banana, we can see all of this yellow apple, we can see all of these. They're not really blocked by anything. The lime is kind of blocked by this apple just a touch. But putting this banana first is going to make drawing the grapefruit, the apple, the mango, the lime. It's going to make all of these a lot easier since we're drawing this one where we can see the entirety of it. So I'm going to look at this red apple next. And so with this red apple, and it's kind of hard to see in the printout, but you can probably see it a little more clearly online. The bottom of this red apple lines up with the kind of upper portion of the circle that we had drawn. And so that's going to help tell us where the bottom portion of this apple will be. So I have kind of the top area of that circle that I had drawn. So I'm just going to sketch a really light line to kind of tell me where the bottom of the apple is going to fall. And then the apple, and you can see this on the slideshow, it kind of crosses over this line just a little bit, but it never touches this banana. So there is a little bit of space, and really I need to kind of reshape this part of the banana just a touch. A little bit more like this. So the apple never touches the banana, but it does cross over this line. And so what it's doing, it's coming over this line a little bit, and then where we have this back table line, the apple crosses over that just a little, and then it will kind of curve down to this line. But we really need to know, how tall is this apple going to be? So the apple, if we look at its overall height, so again, we can kind of mark it with our pencil and our finger. And what we're seeing is it's not as tall as the orange. And so that's something to take into consideration. So I already have my orange drawn. And if I take the marking of my orange I just know that, my orange marking was roughly in this area. I don't want my apple to come up much higher than that. So maybe just a touch lower. Now, how far over or how wide is this apple going to be? So if we take the size of our apple, so again, I'm taking the edge of my pencil or the end of my pencil and marking the width with my fingers. The apple width is still less than the orange. So this is another case of I have my orange drawn. So using my hand, I'm going to measure it like this. And what we can do is it's a little bit less than that, so maybe about in this area. So I'm going to find this marking, carry it over. So now I've created this nice space that I can put my apple in. So I have as far over as it's going to go, I have as far down as it's going to be. And then I can really just kind of go in and sketch in the apple shape within these lines that tell us where the boundaries are. So this part of the curve of this apple is a little bit longer. I was started to make it a little too circular. And then it kind of has a higher arcing curve on this side. Now I'm also going to I'm going to mark where the stem is going to fall. So the stem falls just above this rule of thirds line, or what we are also saying is the back of the wooden box. So it's roughly in this area. So I'm just marking kind of this oval shape to show where the indentation of the apple would be. And then the stem, I'm just going to represent this as just kind of a basic, thinner, smaller rectangle, like right here, just so I know where to put the stem once I start drawing. Now, next step, I'm going to look at the lemon. Now, part of the lemon does cover this apple, so it rests on it just a touch. Now, let's look at how wide the lemon would be. So I can just measure this. I have my measuring. And the lemon width is going to be a little bit less than the apple. And so if you're working at home and have a printer and can print this out, it'll make this whole process a little bit easier. So that's at the end of my pencil would be where the width of the apple would be, but it is a little bit less for the lemon. So I'm just going to move it over just a touch. So I'm just going to make this guideline here for my lemon. And the height of the lemon is exactly the same as the apple. So we're including the top portion of the lemon and the apple. It's on the same plane. So I already have the height of my apple, of course. So I know that my lemon will not be any taller than this or any shorter than that line. And then as far as the bottom of the lemon is concerned, the bottom of the lemon almost touches this kind of edge of the box, so it's pretty far down. So it's further down than the apple. So now I have this rectangular space where I can draw my lemon, and note that the lemon's at an angle, so it's kind of at a diagonal, like what we see here. And so the lemon, just know like the bottom portion of the lemon, what this is. It's got kind of that cone-like triangular piece. And at the top, we have kind of that stubby piece at the very top. So the kind of round form of the lemon is going to be within this line and this line. So I'm just going to draw this oval, and then I'll draw kind of that triangular cone piece of the lemon at the bottom. And then for this part, this is going to have an angle. It does something like that. So I have just kind of a basic lemon shape. And remember, it does overlap the apple just a touch. And again, we can go ahead and take out these inside lines. So we can't see through the lemon, so I'm going to erase that back table line. I can erase this back table line, which is also part of that rule of thirds line. And then I don't need these bounding boxes anymore, so I can take those away. All right, so we have that row of fruit done. So we just are going to look at the mango and the or the grapefruit. And so the mango, let's look at how wide this is. So the mango, the outside curve lines up with the corner of the box, which again is hard to see in this printout on the screen, but you can probably see this a little more clearly in the slideshow. So since I know that, I'm just going to sketch a line to tell me how far out the mango will fall. And then when we are looking at the edge of the mango, and just imagine you take this apple and you divide it into three parts, just roughly three parts. So one, two, and then three. Well, in this first third, this is how far the mango goes. So I have my apple. I'm just going to break this up into approximately three separate parts. So right here, this is how far over the mango would fall. And then as far as the space or the height of the mango is the tallest thing in the whole image. So there is a little bit of space right here. So we're probably looking at maybe half an inch or so. And the mango, like the lemon, is at an angle. So it really kind of follows this diagonal. Now, the mango is really just a true oval shape with the curve of it. But notice where the mango, how far down it comes. So if this is that back line of the box that we originally drew, the mango comes down just a little bit further than that. So not too much. So we're maybe looking at like this area. So once I have that, we're going to just sketch that curve of the mango. So it curves down and then it will curve down into that line that I just sketched. And then what the mango does, it comes over this way and then it doesn't come any further out than that third line that when we broke up our apple. I'm actually going to bring this over just a little bit more. So when drawing anything around, it's okay to work with a lot of sketch lines so that way you can get the shape that you're wanting to achieve. So now I'm going to take away, these outside edges and lines that I had originally sketched. Also going to take away the markings on the apple. Or divide it into three parts. And I'm going to erase back line of the box since we can't see through the mango. Now, the last thing we have to draw at the top is the grapefruit. And so before we can draw the grapefruit, what I'm going to also put in is this kind of dark mark on the mango. So what it is, it's this oval type shape. It falls about here. So this is where the mango would have been attached to a stem on the tree. And so the reason that we are putting that in and why it's important is that the top of this dark mark in the circle, that marks the top of the grapefruit. So we have this in now. So the top of our grapefruit would be right here. So it tells us how tall the grapefruit is going to go. And then as far as the width of the grapefruit, as far as when it comes over, really what it's doing is it's kind of breaking up if you break the banana up into three parts, so one, two, three, it's kind of like the apple. The grapefruit comes over about 1/3. So in my drawing, if I just approximate the thirds, so one, two, three. So this is that first third. So the mango is going to be about that wide. And then we don't really need to worry about measuring the bottom or the side because it's covered up by other fruit. And so this grapefruit, it's circular, but it's very wide. So it's kind of like a squished circle. So again, you're not really trying to draw a circle by any means. You're really just working with those curved lines. And then we can see just a little bit of the bottom portion of the grapefruit in the image. So it does fall below where we have the apple stem. So it's going to be about right here. So not too much of it is going to show, but just enough that we need to include that mark. All right, so I'm going to erase the inside portions of the grapefruit. Aren't too many, but we'll also erase kind of these straight lines that we added in to kind of give us placement. We'll take away these markings of the banana. And that line where the back of the box was. All right, so we've got everything drawn on the top. So now we are going to draw the things on the bottom. So as mentioned before, we want to start with everything that we can see that is whole. So in this case, we do have these three fruit. So this yellow green apple, we've got the lime, and then we have an opal apple or the yellow apple. So I'm going to start with the yellow apple. That's what we started with in class. And if you look at where this yellow apple is, it's directly underneath the red apple. So that's going to help with placement because we already have that red apple on our drawing. Now, what we can also see is that the yellow apple is really the same width as the orange. And then let's check its height. So it's about the same height. So really the same size, it's just a different shape. So there's, less of those perfect curves like what we see in the orange. Now, we're going to want to find how far over the apple is exactly. So when looking at the image on the screen where it's already broken up into the rule of thirds, that rule of thirds line that we see on slide 17, it's really about here. And that's going to help us in terms of placing it on our drawing. So if we were to try and line this up with something else, it kind of lines up with this edge of the apple, but this yellow apple is a little bit wider. So if we know that the red apple is this far over, the yellow apple is going to be even further over. So just a little bit more. So it's kind of lining up with this outside curve of the banana where we had kind of that darker mark. So the area that's right here. Now, just kind of based on this line, we know how wide this yellow apple will be because it's the same width as our orange. So we already have the orange drawn. So I can just take this marking and we'll use this pencil as our marking tool. So right there. So then I can use my other pencil and make a mark at the end of the eraser. So I know my yellow apple is going to be about this wide. And it's more, now we're more concerned with like where exactly in terms of height would we put it. So if we go back to our image, let's find what the yellow apple lines up with. And so we're looking at the very bottom portion of the apple. So right where we see the color disappear. So it doesn't really line up with anything that we have, but I make a mark right there. So the bottom of the picture plane to the bottom of the orange, this marking is right in between those. So that's going to provide us a pretty good reference in terms of where to put it. So bottom of the orange, bottom of the picture plane, right in the middle. So right here. And then just sketch over. So the bottom of my yellow apple is going to fall right in the spot. So now that's going to make it easy to find the top of this apple because we know that it's the same height as my orange. So we're going to go back in and put the edge of my eraser right at the edge of that orange and then use my fingers to mark it and then carry that over here. So I'm going to make a mark right at the top of my eraser. And then I have another square to work with. And so then my apple's just going to be placed inside this square. And so this apple is at an angle. We can tell based on the stem. So in order to start, I'm going to work with this curve. And so the height of the curve needs to touch this line. So it curves over and then it starts to curve down just like that. And then the kind of bottom portion of the apple, it's not like completely flat, but it definitely has a flatter appearance to it. So I'm just working with the shape just a little bit to try and mimic what I see on the image. I'll try and increase this arc a little bit more. There we go. We're going to erase some of these sketch lines that were incorrect. And then we're also going to include the stem. And so the stem of the apple, and it's a little hard to see in the picture right now, but it curves up. And then the stem is the same height as this yellow apple. So I already have this marking made. And what you can see in slide 17 is that we have this rule of thirds line. And then we have this rule of thirds line, and so this is going to start right here, and the stem's gonna come further out than where this portion of the apple ends that we already marked. So I'm just gonna curve this, and then it has kind of this triangular type shape at the very end. Now, with the lime and the yellowish green apple, these are the same height or on the same plane as the yellow apple. So that makes placing these really easy. So I'm just going to sketch this line all the way over. And then with the very far end of the yellow or the greenish yellow apple or the yellow green apple, it doesn't touch this rule of thirds line. It's a little bit shorter than that. So we're going to allow a little bit of space. Now, when looking at the image, the very bottom of the yellow apple, it's lower than the yellow green apple and the lime. So these are just a little bit higher up. So we can find that marking on our drawing. So we have this line, this is where the bottom of that yellow apple would be. And so if we make another line just above that, maybe 1/4 of an inch, that's going to tell us how far down the lime and the yellow green apple would fall. And then these two are right next to each other, so they're not really overlapping one another. So it's just a matter of where to find this kind of middle space. Well, where these two meet and touch is right in the middle of the banana, which means it would be right in the middle of these two lines. So if we know where the middle of these two lines would fall, so you can just kind of estimate that, eyeball it. So I'm just going to sketch this line straight down. Now I have this square space that the yellow green apple is going to be, and then this kind of square space where the lime is going to be placed. Now, just remember, just a little section or portion of the lime is covered up by the yellow apple, so we'll want to keep that in consideration. And then the apple stem covers just a sliver of the lime. It's really not much at all. And so this lime is a very irregular shape. It's not an oval, it's definitely not a circle. It just has kind of its own unique shape to it. And so you want to keep that in consideration while you're drawing the line. So you may have to use quite a few sketch lines to try and get this line shape. Just keep working with all those curved sketch lines. So it hits right here and then it starts to kind of go down. And I'm going to bring this the corner of the yellow apple over just a little bit more. All right, so now we have that irregular, strange shape of the lime, and then the apple is kind of the same way, but it does have a little bit more roundness to it. So this line is kind of like this. So again, I'm gonna, oh, and I messed up my line. So I made my line I made it too far down. It should have been to this line. So I'm gonna need to erase and fix that. Okay, shape of my lime is fixed. I need to kind of clean it up just a little bit. It's a little too angular looking. And then we're going to draw the rest of the apple. So again, the apple touches that line. It's not going to come any further down than this line. So I don't want to make that mistake again with the apple. And then with this apple, we'll do the same thing that we did on the red apple up here. We'll just kind of sketch where the stem is going to go. So it's in the middle, but it's a little bit further down. So it's kind of, so here we have the back line of the box. It's just going to fall right underneath that. So just real basic circular shape for placement. And then the stem will represent kind of the same way, just kind of a thin horizontal rectangle. Just kind of work with these sketch lines just to get it in there. And then we don't need these markings anymore, so we can take those away. And I need to clean up some of these sketch lines. I kind of did those a little too dark, put a little too many in there. And we can't see through the apple or the lime, so we can erase away the bottom of the box that we originally placed. Okay, so the next object we're going to look at is the lemon. So we have another lemon. It's going to be in this area. And when looking at the placement, let's look at the bottom of the lemon. Let's see what that lines up with. So the bottom of the lemon, bottom of the orange, those are on the same plane. So that makes that kind of easy. So I have my orange. So I'm just going to sketch a line going across. That'll help me see where that lemon would go. And then the top of the lemon, let's see what that lines up with. So the top of the lemon is just below the back of the table line. So remember, we put that in, that was really short. But if we look at it, the lemon is just below that, barely below it. So there's that back table line. And I carry this over this way. So the lemon is pretty much, so it's below that, but it's also slightly above this rule of thirds line. So we're maybe going to place it right in this area. So that way it's below this back table line, but it's also above that rule of thirds marking. So to find the width of the lemon, let's look at maybe its width. So let's measure this and see if we can find something else that's like it. This apple's a little bit bigger. So this lemon's about the same. So the width of this lemon and this lemon are very similar. But where's this kind of edge of the lemon? Where's the lemon stop? Well, it's kind of in the edge of it's kind of around the same area where we put that oval. So we have this. So it's maybe just a little bit short. So this would be like the edge of the lemon, and then we know how wide it is because we already have the lemon over here. So we can measure this. I'm just going to take this measurement and out in that area. So now I have another rectangular space to place this piece of fruit. And this lemon too is at an angle, so roughly 45 degrees. So I can easily find that angle, connect this corner to this corner, which would be the emphasize that rectangular shape. And then with this lemon, it's almost teardrop like in terms of how it's formed. So it's pretty round and then it comes down and meets to a rounded point. All right, so I have that placed. I'm just going to erase out all these interior lines, including that rule of third line, because we can't see through the lemon, especially once we start painting. So we're going to move over this way. We're going to place the yellow and red apple. And for this, so this apple is kind of deceiving. So if we look at the width of it, it's pretty large. It's really just as big as, or just as wide as the grapefruit. Now, what also happens with this apple, and again, you can probably see this better on slide 17, it's right in the middle of that banana. So where you have that middle line marked, we know how wide the apple is going to be. So if I take this measurement from our grapefruit and then again to the end of my eraser to where my fingers are, my finger and my thumb, which I just try and put this right in the middle. It tells me that the edge of the apple would be about here. And then the other edge of the apple is going to fall a little bit in this area. Try and get that centered a little bit more. So I know how wide the apple is going to be now. Now, it's a matter of how tall is it? Well, most of the apple on the lower portion is kind of blocked out by these other pieces of fruit. We do have like this kind of triangular negative space. So if I just draw this kind of curved line right here, that would mark the very bottom of the apple. So let's find how tall this particular apple is going to be. Now, let's see if it's the same height as our grapefruit. So it is the same height. So that makes everything a lot easier. So I can find that measurement on my drawing. So there to there. So now I now have another rectangular space to draw this apple. And with this apple, it just has a pretty rounded curve on this side. And then this is going to curve down and over. And then this will curve up and it has to go to that line that I had marked. And there it is. Now, we are also going to put in where the stem would fall. So the stem, it's going to, in kind of that round circular area, it's a little bit higher up and kind of off to the side. So we're maybe kind of looking in this area. And then what the stem does, it curves down. So I may have put it a little too high up. So the stem, it doesn't come super close to this rule of third line, but it's maybe kind of like right here. And we'll just go ahead and kind of mark where that indentation of the apple is going to, or the indentation where the stem would kind of grow out of that apple. All right, so just 2 fruit left. We're going to now look at this red apple. So part of the red apple is hidden by this larger yellow red apple, that little bit of orange in it too. So I'm going to take away all these guidelines, outer edges. I don't need the center line anymore, so we can take that out. Take out all the inside lines of this apple. All right, so for this red apple, let's measure and try and find out how wide it's going to be. So I'm just going to measure right where the other apple stops. So it is the same width as this apple. It just looks a lot smaller. So we have this apple. We have to kind of mark it. That's not right. Let's double check that again. I may have messed that up. Okay, so it's not as wide. Um, so with this red apple, let's look at where the edge is. So the edge of the red apple falls right here. So if we, let's see, break that up. And let's find something that is kind of the same width as this red apple. Okay, so the yellow apple and the red apple are the same width. So I have that yellow apple. Now the red apple, so we're marking kind of where it ended. So again, the red apple, this bottom red apple, and this yellow apple are the same width. So this tells me that the red apple will be this far over. And then as far as the height goes, let's see if that lines up with anything. So the height of the red apple is maybe around the same areas where we made the curve for this larger apple. So I have that curve. If I just kind of sketch over this way, that'll give me the height. And then I've got all these like inside markings. The red apple is going to fill in most of those, but I'm still just going to sketch out this basic shape. So this curve is it starts to angle down, and then the red apple is going to just disappear into the yellow apple right here. And then this curve is going to be a little bit longer. So then that disappears around kind of same area as the stem. And then we're going to have a little like small triangular negative space here because of the bottom portion of the apple. And then there will be another really small triangular negative space created by the other side of the apple. So once I take away all these other kind of markings and guidelines, so we can reveal the inside of the apple, we'll see its form, and then we'll have to put the stem on this also. All right, so where the stem is, and put this rule of third line in because that'll help us place the stem. So the stem curves up and it meets this line. It almost comes to the edge of the apple, but not quite. So it's a little bit bigger at the top, and then it just kind of curves into the opening. Like that. So last piece of fruit that we have is the pear. So the pear, if we look, let's find the height of the pear. So we're going to measure the height based on where we're seeing the stem. So again, it's kind of hard to see on this picture, but The height of this pear is, or including the stem, is not quite as tall as this red apple. So knowing that I have the height of this red apple, we're probably going to mark the height of the pear right here. So that includes the stem of the pear. Now, the bottom portion of the pear, let's see where that lines up. So here's the bottom of that pear, and it is lining up with the bottom of the orange for the most part, maybe just a touch below. So we have the bottom of our orange marked. Okay, so this will effectively mark the lower portion of the pear. And then as far as the outer edge of the pear, let's see if this lines up with anything. So the outer edge of the pear, what this outer edge of the pear is lining up with, and we can see it more clearly on the drawing. So we have this space from the edge of the mango and then the edge of this lemon. The pear is going to fall right in between these two spaces. So right in the middle, kind of a similar marking to what we found over here between the edge here and the bottom of the orange. So we're just going to sketch this down. So now we have the placement of our pear. And so just know that the pear, it comes all the way over, it's touching the red apple, and it disappears into the yellow apple. And the pear is also at an angle, so it's at an angle kind of similar to this. So I'm going to, and this is including the stem right here. So we don't want to make the body of the fruit that tall. And so the lower portion of the pear is very round. It's almost kind of like the bottom of a circle. I'm going to make this curve a little taller and allow it to kind of move into that angle of the shape of the pear. And I'm going to change this just a little bit. And the top of the pear is kind of rounded as well. And it kind of falls into this apple. So I need to work with my pear shape just a little bit. All right, so we have that shape of the pear, and then I'm just going to add the stem back on to just kind of a short little rectangle. There we go. All right, so we've got everything sketched out. So once you get to this point, just erase out all of your kind of guidelines and markings that we found. Just make sure you don't erase, part of the box. So make sure you take note of where that is. You can go ahead and erase out all of your rule of thirds also, because you don't need those anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and erase all these things out. And then for the next video, we'll look at painting techniques and how to approach this painting with the tempera paint and blending the tempera paint so we can add the correct shadows, midtones, and highlights to the painting in order to create a three-dimensional look for each of the pieces of fruit as well as the box. So that will be the second video.